Welcome learners. Today in this session we are going to study about the mobility and changes in Indian class structure. Class mobility is a crucial factor for the understanding of the class formation. Study of class mobility can provide indications of life choices of the members of the society, that is, the impact of one's class of origin on the life choices. In simple words, social mobility is the moving of individuals, families or groups up or down the social ladder in a society. Such a moving from low income to middle class. Social mobility is often used to describe the changes in wealth, but it can also be used to describe the general social standing or education. Social mobility describes a rising or falling social transition of status or means and varies between cultures. In some places, social mobility is recognized and celebrated. In others, social mobility is discouraged, if not completely forbidden. The objective of this session is to study about the mobility and changes in Indian class structure. This is discussed under the topics like mobility in caste, under which the different levels of mobility are learnt in detail. Social mobility and classes in India are also discussed in detail. The recent trends on the mobility is also discussed. Classes are very significant and pervasive dimension of stratification, and the analysis of the mobility along the class line is of crucial significance, not only as an end in itself, but also on account of its ramification on other social processes. The extent of mobility has been used as a measure of the openness of the industrial society, and high mobility rates are an indication of the society being characterized by achievement rather than ascription, and that it is meritocratic, where individuals reap regards on the basis of their personal qualities rather than through inherited wealth and positions. Mobility in caste. While the general impression has been that caste is a closed system of stratification, yet in reality it is far from true. No society is static, and even in the traditional setup where ascription was the prime determinant of one's ritual and occupational standing, access to rewards and resources and the social mobility both upward and downward was not totally absent. Social mobility in the caste system is evident in the increasing discrepancy between caste and occupations, withering away of judgmany obligations, the rigidity regarding the purity and pollutions, and the acceptance of secular lifestyle. In the olden days, Srinivas points out there were two major sources of mobility. First was the fluidity of the political system, which made it feasible for new caste to assume the status of Kshatriyas and exercise power. The second was the availability of the marginal land, which could be brought under cultivation. As a consequence of these two available routes to the upward mobility, leaders from dominant caste such as Reddys, Marathas could seize political power and claim Kshatriya status. The medieval Palla dynasty of the Bengal was Shudra in origin. The Patidars of Gujarat originated as peasant caste. When the leader of dominant caste escalated the rank of Raja or king, it became a source of mobility for the other members, and this was strengthened by adoption of practices and lifestyle of the upper caste. Now, we shall study about the level of mobility. Mobility has taken place at the level of individual, family and group. Sharma has made a careful analysis of these levels of mobility. Mobility of an individual within a family. Some individuals even though of low caste, may have better status and prestige compared to the other members of their family. This may be on the account of one's personality traits such as integrity, honesty, acquisition of education and other achievements. Similarly, an individual of higher caste may lose his position on the account of misdeeds and slothful habits. This may result in downward mobility for the individuals. The individual mobility is therefore a consequence of the individual's capabilities or lack of it, and hence does not influence the prestige of the caste and is least corporate in nature. Mobility of a minority of families within a caste. This kind of mobility is linked to socio-economic and political aspects of the families. The improvement in status could be the result of acquisition of land and education, which is further reiterated by emulating the practices of higher caste which regard to dress, lifestyle and rituals. Mobility of this type is not cooperated in nature and can be viewed as horizontal mobility rather than vertical mobility, which bridges the gap between status distinctions. Buttenstein points out that this trend was predominant in the medieval period. Mobility of a majority of family or group. This kind of mobility is corporate in nature. It involves collective state of prestige, honor, status and is therefore marked by changes in socio-cultural practices regarding purity and pollution. Certain castes improve their positions by discarding practices regarded as impure and degrading. Sanskritization was the chief process which helped these castes to move up in hierarchy and legitimize their claim to upward mobility. Industrialization and mobility. In the analysis of mobility processes and patterns, the term class is viewed in the terms of occupational groupings because occupation is an aspect of one's merit, education and qualifications, and it determines one's status, prestige and salary, which in turn influences the consumption patterns and the life chances. Industrialization has introduced a lot of changes not only in the economic sphere but in all realms of society. Industrial societies are referred to as open societies where the opportunities for mobility and the available is plenty. The high rates of mobility in industrial societies are attributed to rapid economic change, which necessitates occupational, geographical and social mobility to make optimum and efficient use of available talent. It is on this account that Lipset and Zetterberg feel that industrialism creates uniform mobility patterns. Duncan and Blue emphasize on a number of factors generated by industrialization that have a bearing on mobility patterns. They are of the opinion that industrialization is connected with the growing rationalism which accounts for universalistic criteria for selection and upgrading occupational division of labor. Weakening of kinship and neighborhood ties. The emphasis on achievement as a criterion for selection in the industrialization has generated both upward and downward mobility. While it is clear that upward mobility is the result of the recognition given to merit and downward mobility is the result of lack of inheritable positions of the elites. Industrialization affects occupational patterns. In every industrialized or industrializing society, there is an increase in the proportion of professional, official, managerial and white-collar positions and decline in the proportion of unskilled labor jobs, which creates a surge of upward mobility. More and more people are required to manage industry for administration and for distribution of goods and services. Next, we shall study about the education and mobility. The impetus on achievement and qualification as determinants of one's merit has resulted in the increasing emphasis on education and training to obtain them. Education has attained a key role in facilitating mobility, especially in the industrial societies. The increasing specialization and division of labor presuppose the existence of qualified personnel who can handle specialized tasks. These specialists, whether in the field of industry, law, or medicine, are trained and educated in specialized branches of knowledge. These educational and training facilities are open to all in the industrial societies. In the traditional setup, it was imparted to a very small number of people in the guilds, which then restricted mobility. Education has been used as a route to attain the upward mobility. Educational attainment is a major determinant of a career mobility and deeply affects the pattern of intergenerational and intragenerational mobility discussed below. Intergenerational and intragenerational mobility. It refers to mobility or shift upward or downward in the same as one's parents' class. If a son or a daughter of a supervisor becomes an unskilled laborer, it would be downward mobility, and if the same person's son or daughter becomes a manager, it would amount to upward mobility. One of the first major studies of intergenerational mobility was conducted in England and Wales by David Glass in 1949. It was found that intergenerational mobility was quite high and about two-thirds of the persons interviewed were in a different occupational category from that of their father. Most of the mobility was short range. People were found in the categories close to their father. Upward mobility was more common than downward mobility and was mostly concentrated in the middle levels of the class structure. Another significant study was conducted in Western Europe and US. It was found that cross-class mobility was about 30% for all Western industrial societies and that most of the mobility was short range. They found that intergenerational mobility links the effect of the family background on the occupational and social placement of the individual. Educational qualification have a bearing on mobility patterns. Those with higher qualifications were found in non-manual occupations. Also, with similar educational attainment, some manual workers entered in mobility and changed the manual jobs, while those of non-manual workers entered manual jobs. Only college education enabled some manual workers to enter non-manual jobs. According to Lipset and Bendix, poverty, lack of education, lack of exposure are other factors that affect mobility. Later studies by Hauser and Hout have confirmed that short-range mobility is greater than long-range and that mobility is more likely in the middle of the socio-economic hierarchy than at its peak. Intragenerational mobility is where the individual changes social position due to his or her career. For example, a clerk may be promoted to managerial cadre during his or her career. It has been found that work-life mobility is generally less than intergenerational mobility. Its degree depends on the first job. Work-life mobility decreases with age, that is, it does not increase much after the age of 35 years. Although it is not the rule, yet work-life mobility is largely upward. It has been found that intra-generational mobility is also linked to educational qualification, and more specific the educational qualifications and the more specific the educational training, less the scope for mobility. According to the Lipset and Bendix, self-employment is one of the few means of acquiring higher positions and mobility among the manual workers. Next, we shall study about the social mobility and the classes in India. Very often, it is expressed that classes in India are a result of social mobility induced by British rule in India. This statement is far from true because classes did exist in pre-British times too. However, it cannot be denied that in the traditional setup, caste systems was more predominant system of stratification. In the present setup, classes and caste have coexisted as dynamic systems and have interacted to create a complex and multidimensional empirical reality. It is only for analytical purposes that the following different class strata are being identified. Social mobility in agrarian classes. In the traditional setup, gold could be bought or sold and was a source of great prestige. During the British rule, land became a saleable commodity and it had serious repercussion on the nature of agrarian relations and on the social mobility. The introduction of land reforms in the 1950s, which aimed at abolishing the intermediaries such as zamindars and providing land to the tiller, generated vertical mobility, both upward and downward. While some tenants could buy surplus land and became upwardly mobile, others were thrown out by the zamindars who claimed to be the cultivators. This resulted in the pauperization of the landless laborers. Land reforms were also a source of downward mobility for the zamindars. They lost their right to extract taxes and share from the cultivators, which was a source of their wealth. They were left with fragmented holdings which could not support their feudal lifestyle. With the introduction of legal measures such as introduction of panchayats and universal adult franchise, they felt uncomfortable since their influence and power waned. Green Revolution program launched by the government in 1960s has also altered the pattern of inequalities in the villages. The emphasis of this program was on the use of high yielding variety seeds and use of fertilizers for increasing productivity. But these seeds and fertilizers also required other basic infrastructural facilities such as tube wells for regular water supply. These, along with other requirements, cannot be afforded by small peasants. A new class of progressive farmers have come to characterize the villages under the Green Revolution program. They have a large land holdings and can afford to invest in resources like tractors, pump sets, power threshers, etc. These progressive farmers are entrepreneurs who invest in the land to reap profits. They are a distinct class who are separated from the small farmers and from the agricultural labor whom they employ. Green Revolution has thus further reinforced the social inequality. The increasing prosperity of the rich landlords at the cost of pauperization of the workers has generated conflict and strife in the agrarian setup. Political mobilization of the agrarian classes on an all India basis started during the freedom struggle. This continues even today. although the spread and the intensity of the mobilization varies across regions, classes and time periods. It is now clear that a large number of processes have influenced the nature of agrarian classes and mobility among them. There have been measures and mechanisms for the formation of new caste and upward and downward mobility of the existing ones. Industrialization and social classes. Urbanization is not a new phenomenon for Indian society. During the pre-British period, there were large number of cities with a distinct pattern of ranking and administration. After industrialization, the resultant urban migration has been rapid and enormous. This has grossly affected the nature of the social classes. There are 4 major classes that can be identified in an urban setup. These includes the first, the capitalist or bourgeois. The Britishers introduced modern industrialization in India. The setting up of industries, free trade and new markets gave impetus to the trade and commerce. The traders became wealthier and took to industry. It is noteworthy that even today a large number of industrialists hail from trading caste and communities such as Marwaris in Rajasthan, Gujarati, Baniyas and Jains in the west and Chettiars in the south. The merchant class was the first to become capitalist. Certain artisans and craftsmen who availed of the new economic opportunities also set up small-scale factories. The Jatwas of Agra, studied by Lynch, have taken to shoe manufacturing. Some land-owning caste too became industrialists. These include Patidars of Gujarat, Naidus and Reddys of Andhra Pradesh. Industry has expanded immensely after independence and diversified into all fields ranging from iron and steel, textiles, automobiles, electronics to aeronautics. The class of industrialists has become economically and numerically stronger. And the second is the entrepreneur traders and shopkeepers. Urban society was always comprised of entrepreneurs who included traders and shopkeepers. These classes have flourished and expanded with the growth of cities and towns and cashed on the rising demands of new goods and services in them. This class would include entrepreneur running restaurants, marriage bureaus, video libraries and others like property dealers, grocers, launderers, dry cleaners and vegetable vendors, who are a direct link between suppliers of goods and services and consumers. A large number of people have become wealthy by joining this rung of the class structure in the cities, while some have diversified and expanded in their traditional occupation and arts such as dhobis taking to dry cleaning and barbers opening beauty parlors. Others' mobility and change have established absolutely new enterprises and other consumer durables, travel agencies, etc. The third is the professional classes. This class has undergone vast changes in its nature and complexion on account of the changes introduced under the British rule and after independence. The British required a large body of professionals for various purposes. They felt it was cheaper to educate Indians for the same. Hence, a large number of educational institutions were established to train the professionals. This class included doctors, lawyers, managers, bureaucrats, scientists, technocrats, etc. With the expansion of the tertiary sector, this class has expanded both in size and prestige. Even though it is a highly heterogeneous class comprising those ranging from clerks to CAs, babus to bureaucrats. Yet, one factor that characterizes them all is that they have achieved their status through qualifications that befit their positions. The members of this class have made use of the education and training to attain their positions. Another common feature of this class is that a large majority of them are salaried employees of a state or private sector. They are neither direct rulers nor economic producers like industrialists or peasants. And the fourth is the working class. Studies have shown that the earliest working class population comprised of pauperized agricultural labor who were landless or impoverished peasantry who had mortgaged their land. The latter joined the labor force on a short-term basis as a target workers to earn a fixed sum of money to be able to get back their lands. Others joined as seasonal workers in search of work during the slack periods in agriculture. These workers worked in factories and textile mills, plantations, and in informal sectors. What characterized them all was the abject living conditions in the slums. With the expansion of industry in the recent decades, the working class has expanded and diversified into various industrial setups in all parts of the country. They have organized themselves into unions to enter into a better bargaining positions with their employers. These trade unions have political affiliation and have raised their leaders to positions of power, prestige, and mediators between management and workers. The workers have provisions for both intra and intergenerational mobility. They can opt for change in the industrial unit they work for on the basis of the pay structure and work conditions. Besides vertical mobility, the workers also depict horizontal mobilization in terms of labor unions, clubs, and associations, etc. Recent trends. Middle class draws attention for several reasons, ranging from its collusion with the state-driven development of which it is the chief beneficiary to its right-wing politics, its virulent attitude towards affirmative action, and its sheer size and potential for redirecting global economy. Some of the enduring concerns in the middle class owe to a view much prevalent today that countries which have a larger middle class tend to have higher growth rates, that this class is the backbone on the market economy as well as of democracy. The middle class habit of capital accumulation and savings also creates opportunities of leisure, consumption, and entrepreneurial activities. Of particular interest, at least in India and China, of the last 20 years is the middle class consumer whose demand for consumer goods pushes overall income level of the countries. The rapid growth of the last 3 decades has pulled a majority out of poverty and lifted a large percentage to a life of comfort and dignity. Growth has largely been driven by middle income households, disposable income, and spending power. The vibrant middle class is an avid consumer and a catalyst to growth. There are 6 crore households at the backbone, growth engine, and heartbeat of the economy. Over 2/3 of the economy is domestic focused. They nourish the economy, contributing sizable indirect tax revenue. Conclusion. To conclude, in this session, we have discussed on social mobility that even in the so-called closed system of stratification. There is a constant effort among members to improve their social positions through the means available to them. As we have seen in India, some of the mechanisms and the processes involved in the social mobility were culture. The new avenues for mobility provided by education, urbanization and industrialization were quickly united for advantageous shifts in hierarchy. Industrialization and urbanization have played a vital role in generating mobility both in the caste and class societies by emphasizing the role of achievement and skill acquired through education. These twin processes have widened the horizons for vertical and horizontal mobility. In India, caste mobility and class hierarchy coexist, intermingle and have resulted in a complex and multidimensional pattern of stratification and mobility where the two may or may not be coterminous. Thank you.